Welcome to All Mutuals on the Money. Today we're joined by somebody who needs no introduction, and that's Maya Fisher-French. For those of you who know her, she's done a lot of work when it comes to educating the market about personal finance, and we're happy that she joined us today. Welcome.
Thank you, John. So lovely to be on the show.
Tell us a little bit about your journey and what sparked your interest in personal finance. And I mean, you could have chosen to be a journalist on crime or
Thank goodness
crime
not.
matters. But you decided personal finance.
So my background's actually finance. So
Okay.
I worked for a private bank and I worked for a stockbroker and I was there investing people's money. That's
Yes.
my background. And there was always for me this disconnect. People would talk around the braai about their shares and all this, but they weren't talking about what was really happening on a day-to-day basis on their money. You know, people with credit card debt, they didn't have a will in place, didn't have enough money to educate their children. There were real things going on that I started to come across, and I thought, I think we're having the wrong conversation.
Yeah.
I think we're making sexy investment stories and shares, and everybody loves it, you know, crypto, all these things.
Goodness, yeah.
But the things that people are drowning in,
Yeah.
no one was having those conversations.
Yeah.
And I think that is what drew me to it. I'm a little bit of an advocate by nature, you know,
Yeah.
I like to go out and fight and champion the consumer. And that is, I think, what drew me to the
Yeah.
journalist part of it. So I've been a financial consumer journalist now for 21 years.
21 years.
That's a long time.
It is. You have the voice of reason during COVID. I mean, I remember you started talking about the credit life insurance. I mean, I had spoken on that subject maybe a year or two before, but somehow, I don't know, maybe people were not hearing me or maybe it was not, the timing was not perfect, because sometimes you do need a teachable moment for people to hear you.
And I think that's true of everything. It's only when we need something or we need help that we start to understand how something works. And I must tell you, I had been on credit insurance for a long time, complaining about it. I was very instrumental in lodging complaints with the FSCA about some of the abuses that were happening, and then it got cleaned up and acts came in place. But one of the things that I realized come COVID was that the banks were all offering these COVID loans and pause on your loan repayments, but no one was talking about credit insurance.
Yeah.
Now, most people have it on their credit card, they probably have it on their car payments,
Personal loans and
personal
all
loans, and no bank was talking about it. And I was like, wait, hold on, people, do you know you have this insurance? And it did spark actually a huge reaction. And the banks did then have to come forward and remind people, by the way, you know that premium that's been coming off your bank statement or every month,
It's
you
included.
can cash on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, today I want us to unpack the concept of insurance. I mean, look, people say insurance is a grudge purchase, but I think a lot of us don't understand it. Unfortunately, because money is an emotional issue, when something goes wrong, we lose all forms of objectivity in handling those. Can you just unpack for us this concept of insurance? What is insurance and how does it work?
It's so important to understand that insurance is a pool. We're pooling all of our money together to cover a risk event. And I'll give you a very good example. Some people have sort of, if you take it into communities, so say you're a group of mountain bike, you all have mountain bikes or something, and there's a group of 20 of you, and you're worried, you know, that your bike may get stolen. So you say, okay, why don't we all chip in every month into a kitty so that if somebody's bike gets stolen, they can pay for it from that kitty, okay? So that's almost the sense of it, but it doesn't mean that you are going to get a bike paid for once a year or that you can make a claim when your bike hasn't been stolen. And I think I often find that people struggle with the Ubuntu part of life insurance, especially, which is basically we're pooling all of our risks. And if something bad happens to a member of our pool, then they know that they're covered. And I think that's an important part of insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially given the fact that, you know, by pooling contributions, the assumption is that you're not all going to claim at the same time or in one day. So, and that's why it helps, because you are able to cover any risk that may occur.
Well, exactly, and I think that's very important. So you're making an assumption that, you're going back to the bicycle analogy, that you're saying, well, on average, a bike gets stolen once a year. So therefore, we're expecting to replace once a year a bike. And therefore, your contributions into that kitty would be based on that. But if your entire group's bikes were all stolen on the same day, you would have a bit of a problem because there definitely wouldn't be enough money in the kitty. So absolutely, you have a claims expectation when you're working out how much you're going to be putting into that kitty.
That's right. So a lot of people cannot tell the difference between long-term insurance and short-term insurance. Can you just help us with that?
So long-term insurance or life insurance is about a physical event that happens to you as a person. So that would be a death event, you die. You could become ill and you want to insure for critical illness. You may become disabled, you're unable to work. That would be life insurance or long-term insurance. And I think the reason we call it long-term is it's for life, right? It's your life during your life, your whole lifetime.
That's right.
Short term would be for the things that you own. So that would be your house, your car, anything that you're needing to insure your motorbike. So those are things that you need to replace that are items that you actually own. And again, probably short term because you only own a car maybe for 5 or 6 years. It's not a life event.
Okay, so now that we've unpacked the difference between long term and short term, I think it's going to be very important to give a balanced view on the roles and responsibility of a financial institution and the roles and responsibilities of a consumer.
Absolutely, and I think this is extremely important because, obviously I sit in the consumer advocacy space, and so I get a lot of complaints from people about insurance, short term, long term, and I must tell you often, there are clear-cut cases where the insurer has made a mistake, but it's often misunderstanding of the policy, misunderstanding of what the policy does. And I think there needs to be so much education, John, on insurance and for people to understand what it is, what it does, when to claim. And it's important to people. If you think about it, you are insuring a major financial event. That's both, whether it's short-term or long-term, that's what it is, right? My car's written off. That's 200,000 Rand. That is a major financial event. My spouse passes away. That life cover, I need that life cover to look after my children. These are major, major events. So when somebody feels let down in that moment, it is absolutely massive on them, and especially if they had an expectation of receiving that money. But it's not always the insurer's fault.
Yeah. So on one hand, an insurer needs to make sure that through the services of a financial advisor, they give fit and proper financial advice and they keep record of advice. But then on the flip side of it, there's also a part where a consumer needs to be able to provide accurate information.
The responsibility of the insurer is also the responsibility of the financial advisor.
Yes.
And I think that financial advisors need to take that role very, very, very seriously and make sure that whoever they're selling this product to understands what that product is and it is matching their requirements and their needs, and it's something they actually require. So that is extremely important on that sales process. But then equally as a consumer, when you're sitting there and they're asking you questions, you need to be honest. You can't lie and think, well, if I mention that, then my premium may be higher and all of those, because those are things called non-disclosure. So a consumer has the requirement to be accurate and truthful in the information they're providing. They also need to make sure that any identity documents that they supply, any bank accounts they supply are valid. I get so many people coming where a family member's passed away and they're trying to find a policy. Make sure that your beneficiaries are named. Make sure you keep your beneficiaries up to date. Make sure your family know if there are policies in place. So I think there's a lot that needs to happen in that conversation, at that sales point, to make sure that information is accurately conveyed to the consumers. They know what they're buying, but then the consumer is giving accurate information to the insurer or the advisor.
Yeah. In your experience in dealing with different financial institutions and in the industry with your advocacy work, what do you pick up as a major cause of delay in processing claims?
So there's short and long term. So we maybe start with long term. So long term is, in fact, it's quite interesting if you go and look at the life claim stats. Between 95 and 98% of all claims are paid. So I think we misunderstand that from a, there's this perception, and I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to get paid out, and that's why I don't believe in it. But actually it's genuinely paid out. So when there are issues like, as we mentioned, non-disclosure, where somebody hasn't mentioned a health issue. Certainly if somebody has passed away quite soon after the policy has been taken out, obviously they'll need to check, was there non-disclosure, were there previous medical issues, any foul play suspected, those could delay it. But those are sort of maybe events that are problematic. But again, it will be about finding the beneficiaries. Were the beneficiaries listed on that? You know what the unclaimed benefit fund is? I can't remember now, John. It's about 30 billion or something sitting in there.
That's a lot of money, yeah.
You know, so that we can't find the beneficiaries, or the beneficiaries' documents, ID documents are not in place. So I think I find there seems to be an admin issue. So administration, I don't know about you, but admin drives me crazy. And just for my own life. So, you know, when admin's out of not working properly and you don't have the proper paperwork, that can often create delay. But the insurer needs to make sure they've got the right service channels to assist people, and really put in a lot of effort at that claim stage as well.
What would you say about the need or the importance of speaking to a financial advisor? You know, because very often people take a policy and they hardly speak to a financial advisor thereafter. I mean, how often do you see your financial advisor?
This is an extremely important point, because what most people don't understand is if they bought their insurance product, even short-term, long-term insurance product, from a financial advisor, that financial advisor is receiving income every single month from that policy. So why are you not speaking to them? Why are you not going to them on a regular basis and saying, what cover do I have? What's this policy actually? And I must tell you, I have a financial advisor for my long-term insurance, and I meet with him once a year to go through all of my long-term insurance, because I've got the whole thing. I've got life and disability and income protection and all these things, critical illness, because I never remember. And I mean, you would think I would remember, but I'm like, did I have it? Oh no, I do have that in place. And it's such an outstanding opportunity to sit down, relook everything. How old are the kids? What do I need? You know, have I got something put aside for state duties? All of those, I reassess my long-term insurance every single year. And I have that discussion with my financial advisor, because I forget what I have. So I think it's really important. You are paying that person. Whether you like it or not, you're paying them. So please use them.
Look, we don't have a memory of an elephant, so I mean, it would be challenging to remember everything. But you recently wrote an article about having to reread your policy contract. I mean, what did you learn from doing that?
That was on short term. So I meet with my financial advisor on long-term insurance my long-term life cover once a year. But I never meet my short-term insurance person. I don't even think about it unless I get a new car and I have to update it. I think I was having a conversation with someone, and I went to look at my short-term insurance contract, and I realized I had never read it properly. I'd never read it. It's a lot of pages. I'd never sat down and read it. And I discovered a whole lot of things, and I did an article about it, and I can't tell you, go and read your policy documents. So first of all, what I noticed, although my premiums hadn't gone up by much, which I was quite happy with, my excess had been increased on quite a lot of cover. One of the big ones was on power surges, because obviously they're getting more and more claims. So rather than increasing my overall household or building insurance premium, they simply increased the power surge from 1,000 to 1,500 rand, whatever it was, the excess. So I noticed that suddenly I had a lot more excess increases, which I hadn't really clocked, right? I hadn't thought about. In reading it, I realized that my insurer actually covers quite a few things that I didn't know I could claim for. One of them is leak detection. So if I have a pool leak or even a leak on my property, they will pay and cover the cost of bringing out a leak detector.
Wow.
If my leak had resulted in my municipal bill being 50% more than it was in the last 4 months, they will pay that. If a tree falls over in a storm, they will pay to have it removed. I didn't know they paid for all these things. And John, the most exciting thing is I've got 3 years before I'm 55. When I'm 55, I no longer pay excess on my car insurance.
Oh, nice one. That's a nice bonus.
Nice bonus. But go and read your insurance contract. And I mean, it's very boring, but it's worth doing. To me, that is really important, is that we are paying this money every single month. I don't even want to tell you how much I spend between my husband and I on long-term insurance. We've got kids. I have my own business. I've got income protection. It's a lot of money. So surely I should know what's going on in that.
And I guess the other advantages of reading your policy contract, even if it's after the fact, is that if there's any inaccurate information, that you can always detect and rectify, so that you don't have an issue when you file a claim only to find that certain information was inaccurate. Sometimes we talk about a person insuring a car, and then you said to the insurer, your car is parked in a locked up garage, there's a 24/7 security surveillance, but then you move. suddenly those things are not in place. I mean, you need to inform your insurer.
If your insurer requires you to have your alarm on when you leave the home, and you don't put the alarm on and you are robbed, they don't have to pay out that claim. So it's very important that you understand your responsibilities in that, because it's going to be quite a shock to you if you suddenly discover that that you're not covered because you didn't put your alarm on, or maybe they're paying a lower portion. So it is important to understand what your responsibilities are. We see it often on building insurance. There was a cracked tile on the roof, you never repaired it, it resulted in a leak. Sorry, we're not paying for that damage because you didn't keep up the maintenance on your home. And then people are angry. And understandably so, because they now have an event that they don't have the money for. They thought the insurance would cover it, but the insurer says, sorry, you didn't meet your responsibility. So it becomes tricky.
So going back to long term, in your experience, what do you find to be the trigger for most complaints that are referred to the ombuds?
A lot of it is, it's bad service, unfortunately. So people say to me, Maya, they're not coming back to me. I've gone to them. Remember, they're coming to me because they haven't been heard. So I think there's something that needs to be absorbed in that. That, why go to the journalist? Why not, if you were getting the responses that you needed? So I think one of that is one of the issues. The other issue is people often come to me, they're looking for a family member's passed away and they find an old policy document, or they'll see something's had gone off their paycheck or off their debit, their accounts, and they're trying to find that policy. Invariably, that policy had lapsed a long time ago and there's no funds, which is, I think, why they're not getting the response from the insurer, because the insurers, well, there's no money here. And so that there's a lot of those issues. So I think admin matters there. But also, John, I do have to tell you, I think where the industry needs to improve dramatically is on language.
Yes.
The complicated language that is used. And I want to share with you a story. A woman contacted me. She said her father had taken out a policy on his life with her as the beneficiary. He had passed away and she was trying to claim, and they kept telling her that she didn't have a claim. And I then contacted the insurer with her permission, and the insurer sent me the letter. John, I needed a degree in law to understand this letter. I had to read it 3 times to understand it. And I thought, how is this woman supposed to understand it? And what was actually quite interesting in the letter was basically he had insured her life, not his life. So she was the insured life, and he would have benefited had she passed away. She didn't understand that, but I don't know if he understood that, because he had communicated that differently to her. And then I wondered, what about the sales process? Where's the record of advice? Where's the insurer? Why, when a policy, in her case, when she got that policy, she should have contacted the financial advisor who sold it to him, because it would have been on the policy somewhere, right? Those documents, and said, what actually happened here? What did my father purchase, and where is the record of advice?
So if a consumer has a complaint against a service provider or a financial institution, is there a complaints process in place? I mean, what recourse do they have?
Oh, I'm so excited about the new Financial Consumer Ombud. And that is a super ombud that is sort of replacing, because we had short-term ombud, long-term ombud, banking ombud, credit ombud. And people were getting so confused about where to go. So say, for example, you had a mortgage, you took out a home loan. That's a credit agreement, right? But then with the bank, banks had a banking ombud, the credit ombud didn't deal with banks. So where do you go? To the credit ombud or the banking ombud? Then you would have life cover on that bond, right? You may have building insurance on that bond. And you may have had all of those products with the same bank. Where do you go to complain? Which ombud? So this new ombud has replaced all of the various different ones. So you're just going to a central point now, and they will then have divisions, obviously, which deal with it, but they can they can talk to each other and communicate, and sometimes if the cases overlap, they can deal with it. And I'm very excited about that. And I think people, first of all, you have to escalate within the insurer or financial institution first. That's where you go. If you're getting no joy, please use the ombuds. I see their rulings. They are very consumer focused. They really, really are.
So let's go back to short term. So this concept of overinsurance and underinsurance, can you unpack that for us?
Yes, why people get upset with short-term insurance is often because of being underinsured. So underinsurance is, you say, my household contents are worth 250,000, but they're actually worth 500,000. And you are now insured for 250,000, and you have an event. You get robbed, your laptops are stolen, your TV's stolen. The assessor comes in and says, wait, hold on a moment. Your household contents are actually worth 500,000. That means you were 50% underinsured. We're only paying out 50% of the claim. That is the most common complaint on short-term insurance I get. And I just want to give a tip to people. What I do, every couple of years, I get my insurer to send an assessor. And I have the assessor assess my whole home. And I promise you, they open up every cupboard, and they go into your clothes, and they open your drawers, everything, my cell phones, anything, any items, jewelry is all listed. I have no problems. I had quite a big robbery once. I had a lot of laptops stolen, cameras. I was paid out in 48 hours because the insurer knew I had been properly insured. So I would say that is really, really worth doing.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of consumers who don't know the difference between a risk product and a savings product. Like even during COVID, where you would have people cancelling their life cover thinking there would be value there. Can you just explain the difference between a risk product and a savings product?
This is exactly, so during COVID, a lot of people had to stop their life covers. They just couldn't afford to keep it going. And they would say to me, but is there any value in it? Like, am I going to get something out of it? And it's not at all like that. I think many years ago you used to have those sort of policies that were linked. But no, a risk product, and you think about it as car insurance. If you insure your car and you stop that insurance, you don't expect to have a payout. You know, if you could swap insurers, people are chop and change insurers all the time on car finance. Who's going to give me a better deal? It's the same with your life cover. If you have insured your life, obviously the idea is that you keep the life insurance, and one day you're going to pass away, and then your family will benefit. But if you stop that life cover, you were only insured for the months that you have paid for it. There is no underlying investment value in it, and I think that was quite interesting to me, because I realized there was quite a misconception around that.
Yeah, and I think this is where people become offended when they didn't understand, and they have an expectation that there would be a payout when that happens. If you were to give your top 3 tips, financial tips, what would that be? On
insurance specifically?
Yes.
Understand what it is you're purchasing. And go back regularly to make sure you understand it. Review your policies and check in. And if you find it all a bit complicated, remember the person who's being paid a commission every single month for selling it to you. Go back to them and say, what is it exactly that I have? I would even, and I know some people are very sensitive after that whole Rosemary Kluwer story about telling family members about life cover. But please, your family do need to know about any policies and documents and things like that you have. Make sure that when you are engaging with an insurer that you're honest. Because you know what's the point of paying all those premiums not to get paid when you need the money? Because you were dishonest. Because I promise you, when claims comes, they will look for they will find out. So don't be dishonest. And I think that the third one is always compare quotes, but make sure you know what you're comparing like with like. That is a big one, both short and long term. So in short-term insurance, if somebody's coming in with a much lower quote, what's missing? Suddenly you may find it doesn't have hail damage cover, for example. There's going to be something missing in that. Nothing's ever a lot cheaper. There's something not covered. Now maybe it's a cover you don't need, but is there a gap? On long-term insurance, very important, it could be the premium pattern. You could be paying less premiums now, but they're going to escalate massively as you get older. There could be important exclusions on your life cover or your critical illness or whatever cover you have. So I would say, if somebody's coming to you and saying, don't worry, I can get you a much lower quote, find out what's missing.
And compare apples with apples.
Compare with apples with apples.
Funny enough, earlier you mentioned the Rosemary issue. I mean, just how much of fraud or attempts of it is happening in the insurance industry?
You were asking me earlier what creates delays in payouts. It's fraud. And it's the prevalence of fraud. So we have seen fraud, as the economic conditions worsen, there is more and more fraud. And both short-term and obviously on long-term. People faking death certificates, people, I mean, do you know that there are drug dealers taking out funeral cover on their clients?
Goodness.
Yeah, the kind of fraud that you have. I came across, I was listening to a case about a policeman who went to the local hospital and took out funeral cover on all the ill patients.
Goodness.
Yeah, this is what's
Because
going.
their lives are got out to.
Yeah, they know that they're going to probably die in the next 6 months. He made sure that they weren't going to die before, because there's often a 6-month waiting period. That's what the insurers are up against. So this massive prevalence of fraud is meaning that the insurers are having to spend more time verifying information and checking information. And I think that is bringing in some of the challenges. But you know what I was actually saying to you before we did this podcast? I thought, people are concerned, am I going to get paid out? Rosemary got paid out, no problem. She had her documents in order. She knew what she needed.
Yeah.
She got the police clearance, the police certificates. She knew exactly how to file that claim, and she got paid out really quickly.
That's food
Think
for
about
thought.
it.
That's food for thought. Anyway, Maya, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure our followers will learn a lot from this podcast, and we look forward to having more chats with you in future.
Great, it's been so nice to chat to you, John.